Why is learning to sing harder for some people? Why do some people just get it, whereas for you, you're just running around in circles? And no matter what you try, you're still stuck with that strain or that tension. If this sounds like you, today I want to share with you why exactly this is happening and also a better strategy when it comes to learning to sing. And at the end, I'll also share some student examples so you know exactly how to structure your own practice sessions as well to see quicker results. Now, real quick, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ivan. I'm a voice teacher who works with students from all around the world. And really on this channel, my goal is to make learning how to sing as easy and as simple as possible. So if that is up your lane, consider subscribing. Now, if you're interested in improving your voice with less of the headaches, check out some of the links down in the description on ways to work with me. Also, for those of you who are watching this on video, I'm currently traveling at the moment, so that explains why the background is a bit different. Anyway, let's dive into it. Let's start here. Learning to sing is a tug of war for most people. And what I mean by this is whenever you go and practice, two things can happen. The first one here is you do it correctly. So you reinforce good technique, you reinforce correct musculature, you reinforce the correct habits when it comes to singing. Now, what I mean by this is, for example, when you're trying to sing higher, you only engage the stretch of the vocal folds and nothing else. You don't change the vowel, you don't change the volume, you don't really change anything beyond just pitch. Now, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, I want you to check out episode 129 and episode 138 after this episode. So 129 and episode 138. That's where I talk about clean technique in more detail. Now, the second thing that can happen here is you kind of do it correctly, you kind of do the exercises, but there's a lot of unnecessary movements, a lot of unnecessary muscles, a lot of unnecessary habits being engaged. In other words, it's just very cluttered. You know, things like clamping down on your jaw, things like having to move your head to a certain position, even sometimes just pushing a bit more air, adding a bit more volume. All of those are unnecessary, say in the example of going up and down your range. And depending on how much time you spend on each of these two scenarios, clean technique versus you're kind of doing it, but there's a lot of extra clutter, this is why a lot of singers can get stuck in this tug of war. Think of it like this, right? Say you're practicing for 30 minutes each day, but the first half, you kind of do all these weird kind of extra things. No, 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 no. You're going to adding more volume, more pressure. Or maybe your mouth does something kind of weird. No, 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 no. Or even maybe just looking in a certain direction, or like you have to tilt your head to a certain position to get to a note. And then in the second half, no, 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 no. You get a lot of that cleaner movement. You just get this nice kind of stretch and you don't really add a lot of extra things. Even though you do get some cleaner reps, even though your technique does clean up, what kind of happens is when you go to sleep that day, because you've spent half of your time, doing it with clutter, doing it with a lot of unnecessary movements, and then you get some clean ones at the end, you're still giving your brain a lot of mixed signals. And it's this constant kind of reinforcing of the good wiring and also the bad wiring that keeps you stuck in this tug of war. And so that naturally brings in this question, like, how do we win this tug of war? What if we just adjusted our routine so that we were executing with clean technique most of the time? What this does is it starts to tilt the balance over towards clean technique, and it reinforces more of that kind of correct technique, but it also gives a chance for those bad wiring, those bad habits to die off. Say, for example, coming back to that 30 minutes of practice each day, what if we spent the first 2/3 reinforcing only correct technique? Now, I know this sounds dead obvious, but hear me out here. For some of you to get to cleaner technique, you might have to narrow down that exercise or the context of the exercise or make it easier. Now, let me explain. Now, say, for example, you can't find clean technique on this. I'm kind of straining. I'm doing all these extra things. I'm going to narrow down and I'm going to try to find a context which is going to give me an easier time. Say, for example, I choose a certain word, or maybe I choose a certain volume. Let's say here, no, 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 no. So here, I've actually just chosen the word no. I find it a bit easier, and I go a bit softer, right? But what happens is it allows me to feel correct technique a bit better. It allows me to feel that kind of stretching, right, of the voice. And there's no clutter, there's no weird interruptions. It just works. And I just spend my first 2/3 of my lesson living here. Sure, it's not necessarily a sound you're going to sing with in a song. It's a bit kind of light, but it allows you to reinforce the correct wiring or the correct technique again and again and again. Now, of course, we still need to expand it to the context of singing, right? Singing usually has a bit more pressure, it usually has a bit more volume, right? But this is where the last third of your practice can really come in. This is where we're going to try to challenge a slightly harder context. And yes, we might invite some of those bad habits again for a moment. But because you're limiting the amount of reps here, it's really just the last third of your practice session. And what I've also found is when you take the time to really reinforce correct muscles, correct habits at the beginning of each session, you have a much higher chance of getting it in this slightly harder context as well. Now, once again, for example, maybe I might just add a bit more volume. No, 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 no. Now, just to give you some more examples here are some actual examples or routines from my students. So the first one here, easy wins, basically where can I find clean, correct technique? Now, it was pretty generic, right? And I just left it generic for the student because the student was a bit more advanced. But then in the second half with the challenge, it was basically taking it up to the high C and also changing to certain harder words because that's where he was bringing a lot of those bad habits. Now, in this second example is quite different. Really, for the first half, my student was just no, 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 just matching pitches on single notes because here, this was the only context I was able to get clean, correct technique. And then really in the challenge part, we challenged a slightly harder context, which was no, 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 doing it with a couple more notes and seeing if we can match pitch. As you can see, these routines are wildly different depending on their skill level. But what is common between both of those routines is starting off with where they can reinforce good, correct technique each day and spending half to, if not 2/3 of their time just living there. And then in the remaining part of it, they go challenge a harder context such that, when they go to sleep that day, they reinforce correct wiring and it sets them up for the next day where they do it again. And then when we meet up the following week, hopefully by then, that challenge exercise now becomes the easy win. It becomes a place where they can live in correct technique. And then we find a harder context to challenge once again. And so really it is this process that allows you to beat this tug of war. And especially if you're feeling stuck with your voice, this is how you win. Anyway, that is all. I hope this makes sense. If it didn't, let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to kind of tackle it there as well. If you did find this episode useful, please share this with a friend or family or leaving a 5-star review if you on the podcast really, really means the world to me. And it just helps this channel grow a lot faster. If you're interested in improving your voice once again with less of the headaches, I've got some links down in the description below on how you can work with me. Apart from that, my name is Ivan. I'm your voice teacher. I'll see you next week. Take care.